with our latest icon, Rod Pedersen. Good day to you, sir.
How are you, Brad?
I'm doing well. Let's start at the beginning. What made you want to get into broadcasting, or what made you get into broadcasting?
Well, I either thank God or blame God, because I don't ever remember not wanting to be a broadcaster. So, yeah, blame him. I was like 6 years old, I think, in Milestone, Saskatchewan. We had a career day, and everybody had to get up at the front of the room and say, what do you want to what for a living? And I'm pretty sure every guy in their class and some girls said farm with my dad. But mine was, I want to be a radio announcer. And I had a microphone made out of aluminum foil and headphones. And I said, that's what I want to do. That was the earliest recollection I have. Grade 1, Milestone, Saskatchewan.
Now, was it a radio broadcaster or was it always sports?
No. Sports, to be honest. I started as a DJ. And in Weyburn, and that was kind of what I wanted to do. Sports kind of grabbed me and yanked me. I met Casey Clark many years later at Craven. And he was like, dude, you're living my life as the voice of the Riders. I said, you're living mine. I wanted to be a country music DJ star. And we hit it off famously. So, I mean, life takes you places. Jim Hobson said to me once, he goes, life has a way of taking you where you need to go. I never forgot Jim saying that.
You know, very interesting that you say that sports wasn't the plan. For so many people that are in sports, it's always been the draw of sports. So how do you move from being a DJ to getting into sports?
I don't really know. I mean, grade 10. I went to Weyburn CFSL, knocked on their door. I said, give me a job. And they said, what do you want to do? I said, what do you got? So that was in grade 10 when I started in Weyburn. And then I went to PA when I was 19 to do news. And the Raiders literally pulled me in and said, you can do color. You clearly know hockey. Would you do color for the Raiders? And I'm like, yeah. And a year later, I was doing play-by-play. I've never applied for those jobs, So I don't know. It grabbed me. But I loved the country music. I mean, I was covering Craven 91, interviewing Patty Loveless and Sawyer Brown and Charlie Pride. That's what I wanted to do, Brad. I never ever really told anybody that. But
so it was the attraction of being on air that got you into it. But one of the things about sportscasters that always amazes me is their ability to remember names and remember situations and call that back. Did you develop that? Did you always have that quality?
No, that's just photographic memory. I mean, it's got to be what it is, photographic memory. I mean, I remember doing the World Juniors in 2012. I always thought that would be the ultimate test of your chops as a play-by-play guy, to call Sweden and Finland and Russia and Czech Republic, and I was able to do that flawlessly, I think, on the Sportsnet radio network. But you also were a DJ, Brad. Remember when we used to spin your chair and grab the record off the back of the wall? How many times you didn't even need to look? Right? It's what we do. So I don't have a lot of natural talents, but that's one, is remembering names and numbers. People bring that up all the time as far as being a sportscaster, and that was never really a challenge for me, thank God. And, calling Pats games, Rider games, usually one shift through a Pats game, I would remember all of the other team's numbers, and I already knew my own. So I'd like to think that's a God-given thing.
Now, from the doing the play-by-play for the Raiders, what was the next step?
I was 22, and Willie Cole called me and said, we have an opening here to be the voice of the Regina Pats. And for me, that was my dream job. That's all I ever wanted. So I was like, bye, PA. And they were upset at me when I left, but I didn't care. That's all I wanted to do, was work at CKRM and call the Pats games. That was my lifelong goal. That's what I grew up listening to, was Kevin Gallant, but literally the radio under your pillow, listening to Jeff too. I really enjoyed your interview with Jeff Courier. Some of my best memories were listening to him on the radio too, on the farm. So Willie called and I was gone. I was like, within a day, I was in Regina. September 5th, 1995 was my first day on CKRM as the voice of the Pats. And I'll tell you, Brad, I don't know if you remember, but back then the Pats used to wear those black blazers with the Pats logo with Molson on it. Mm-hmm. And they handed me my blazer. I still remember, the Graham Tour gave it to me. I still remember the day. That was a proud day.
Now, Talk about that time covering the Pats. Different than PA, obviously. This was something that you really held to your heart to be able to be the voice of that team.
Oh, yeah. It was the greatest time of my life. It really was the greatest time of my life. I'll tell you why, because you're sitting there in CKRM studios right now. You get it. I mean, before I was the voice of the Riders, with the Pats, nobody really knew who I was. I didn't care. I got to call the games, be with my team, and it was fun. And that era, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was at a game here in Florida, Seattle Kraken at the Panthers, and I said, name the 5 former Pats I put on Facebook who are on the Kraken. And somebody wrote in and said, Josh Holden, Boyd Kane, Chad Mercier, Derek Morris, Pats from 1995. So that, like, those guys had a huge impact on the city, that era. Josh Holden, that was a very impactful time in Pat's history. And I hope you understand what I'm saying. Like, I was fairly anonymous living in Regina calling Pats games, and I was very happy with that. Once I became voice of the Riders, it was just another level. All of a sudden, you were a celebrity like the Riders were and all the rest. But just being the voice of the Pats was just a nice little thing. It's all I ever wanted to do. There wasn't a lot of pressure there.
So talk about that. Talk about the transition to the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Yeah. You want the truth? I guess you're asking.
We could start there.
Well, in 98, I was called into a meeting at CKRM, and they said, we want you to be the voice of the Roughriders. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. And they were like, what? How do you turn that down? I said, well, I want to be in the NHL. I love the Riders, lifelong fan, but I'm a hockey guy. And the Parkers owned the Pats, and they didn't really want me to do the Riders too either. So I didn't. So they brought in one guy for 1 year, and then they came back to me after the 98 season, and they said, okay, you don't have a choice. You're going to be the voice of the Riders. You're our employee. So I was. I mean, it wasn't an insulting thing. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't really my... What did you say? You said earlier, how does sports grab you? There's another example of it right there. And I mean, it was a life-changing experience, and I realized within a day, I'm like, holy crap, this is pro sports. This is a big deal. Really big deal.
Yeah, you talk about the difference from calling the Regina Pats to calling the Saskatchewan Roughriders, because in this province, you now elevated yourself. You are now publicly known everywhere you go.
Yep. It's a lot. It was fun. Yeah.
Talk about that, because you've mentioned Jeff Courier, and he addressed that as well, that coming to Saskatchewan, be associated with the Roughriders, that's next level stuff now.
Well, you don't realize that, especially I'd never lived anywhere other than Saskatchewan, other than going to college in Calgary at Mount Royal, but I never knew what it was like outside of Saskatchewan. So that was the one thing. But I grew up in hockey. My dad was a hockey guy. I played hockey. The Pats, it was easy. Doing hockey to me is like breathing. We never played football. We didn't have football in Milestone other than throwing the football around on the lawn at the old folks' home. Like, I didn't know the game, And so I bought the book Football for Dummies. I asked the Rider coaches, which was Cal Murphy and his staff at that time, if I could watch film with them, which they were very receptive to me doing. I needed to learn the game. I bought a CFL history book, a rule book. I threw myself into it because I didn't know the game, and I didn't want to I didn't want to let people down. It was a big job, and I took it really seriously. And quite frankly, I was, 20 years later, when I left the Riders and I was getting back into hockey, I had football people saying, what do you know about hockey? I'm like, are you kidding me? Football people thought I was a football guy. I mean, I'd been doing it for so long, and I'd worked so hard to be a football guy. But in the age of social media now, and that was pre-internet, basically, I would have got roasted so bad, I don't think I would have lasted, because it took me a year or two to really get onto it. But once I did, oh man, it was the funnest job ever.
Now, I find this fascinating. There's probably people watching this going, wait a minute, I applied for that job.
Probably.
And I knew football. The fact that you taught yourself a sport that you weren't that aware of and became, as you said, that's what you were known for. You were known as a football guy, is really quite remarkable. And I do find interesting as well your comparison to today, that this just could have never happened now.
No, not at all. Well, and it won't, for me, it won't happen now because I'm living in Florida and I've had basketball people come to me. I've had a lot of opportunities to get into basketball. I'm like, no, I did this once 25 years ago. It was too stressful then. Learning a new sport, I'm not doing it again. But thanks. I mean, it was a different time. I was 26 years old and I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So I remember thinking, because there's a lot of pressure being voice of the Riders too, for a variety of reasons. And I'm like, I don't want to screw this up. And I remember thinking, if I ever get comfortable doing this, it'll be the greatest job in the world. And within a couple of years, I was comfortable doing it, and it was the greatest job in the world. But it's just, I mean, I was doing open line. I mean, people say to me, I brought in John Lynch in 1999. To use his terms, I rescued him from the scrap heap to co-host Sportsline with me and do the pre and post game shows. I mean, Lynch knew the game. I didn't. And he was an icon, you know? So when John passed a couple of years ago, they were like, even his family said, you know, you really made John a star and resurrected his career. I said, I didn't do anything. That was all frenzy, but I needed somebody to learn from and bounce. Carm was awesome too. Carm was really great. I saw Jeff Currier reference Carm and the impact. That was a wonderful duo too. But, yeah, I had a lot of learning to do in a hurry, and the fans were very patient. I don't think it hurt that I was from Saskatchewan. I think people gave me a lot of leeway that way.
Do you think it was beneficial to have that other individual in for one season before you took over? Was that kind of a buffer, do you think, maybe?
Everybody said that. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, Jeff and I were very close too. Trust me, he's a mentor of mine. And he had told me somewhere along the line, he was like, you took this position to the next level. And I said, no, I did not. There's no tapes of what we did back then, but I came in and did everything Jeff did. I did. I just continued. I mean, he talked about the 4-man sports department. Listen, I do want to talk about in this interview growing up listening to CKRM, because it was the soundtrack of my life. But Bob Hutton, Dale Corey, Jeff Currier, Kevin Gallant, they were the icons. They built that CNN of sports in Saskatchewan. And I'm like, I'm not going to change any of this. Countdown to kickoff, Roughrider warm-up, all those things Jeff put in. And I just continued them. So the foundation was built. I just continued. It was nice of him to say, but I don't believe it.
We'll talk about that sports room, because I remember that. I remember, you know, there was the sports team, if you will, and they were a team unto themselves. Talk about your experience in that room.
Well, it was brief. I mean, my dad and Willie Cole were friends. So Dad from time to time would bring me to the radio station to see Willie, and I would go immediately to the sports department and hang. I was like 14, 15, and hang out with those guys. And they to me, they were absolute icons and legends. There's no doubt. But very shortly after that, that all disbanded. You know, and when Jeff was like, I was part of a 4-man sports department, he said, I'm like, well, I was part of a 1-man sports department. Those were busy times, as you know. But I guess that's why we're sitting here talking today. That people seem to appreciate the effort that went into keeping it as Saskatchewan's sports leader.
Did you feel the pressure, or did you feel the moment? And I'm asking that in the sense that everybody I've been speaking to, in the moment, they're not really aware of the impact that they're having, or the size of their duties and what they're going to be, you know, and what the end result is going to be. Were you aware, or was it just you were feeling the pressure of it?
Both. I knew how big it was, and I didn't want to screw it up, period. You know, and those calls of those Grey Cups, they didn't just come to me. You know, I knew for years and years and years, if the Riders ever won a Grey Cup, I was going to say, go crazy, Saskatchewan, go crazy, which was, I stole from Jack Buck and the Cardinals in the 1960s, but nobody remembers or cares. And, you know, in 2013 Grey Cup, when I said elation in Rider Nation, I had that rehearsed and ready to go because I knew these should be iconic calls in Roughrider history. So I knew how much that team means to the people of the province, and I wanted to do a good job every single day that I was in that booth. So I felt the pressure, but pressure's a good thing if you use it right.
What was your, doesn't have to be favorite, but what's some of your more memorable experiences calling the games?
Who we are going to talk about me growing up listening to CKRM though, right? Because I want to. I do want to. Okay. Well, good and bad. The good was the 2013 Grey Cup. Somebody just asked me about that the other day. Ironically, here in Florida, about I was on a podcast and they pulled up some old calls of I'm like, holy shoot, that's awesome. Jammed Taylor Field, jammed Labor Days. The big one is the 2013 Grey Cup, where we just annihilated Hamilton that day, as you know, 45-23. Just the whole day. I mean, the calls were great, but the stadium was full, if anybody remembers, 90 minutes before kickoff, the 2013 Grey Cup. And the Ticats came out on the field and the crowd was chanting, Henry, an hour and a half before the game. And I was like, ooh, Rider Nation's dialed in for this one today. And it had been a busy week. Carm had lost his voice. Mine wasn't that better. But just that day, I call it the greatest day in Saskatchewan history, was that win, 45-23 over Hamilton. And then the stadium stayed full for an hour afterwards for all the Grey Cup presentations and all the rest. So that one, and then that was the 2013 Grey Cup. The 2007 Grey Cup, I remember walking into Skydome that day, and they said, hey, Rod, you're going to be broadcasting in the end zone in the Blue Jays radio booth. I'm like, the end zone? I'd never called a football game from the end zone, and I'll tell you, Brad, it's not easy. But I'm like, hey, I'm just happy to be here. Very happy to be here. It wasn't the best vantage point, but it really wasn't the best game. But as you know, the Riders won 23-19 that day, so that was pretty awesome. But the other thing is just calling games at Taylor Field. Every single game, you would walk into that booth, and it would be just me and Willie. We were the first ones there in that booth, and we would be cleaning out dead pigeons, bird shit, who knows what's dead under the desk, a mouse or something. Like, it was everybody. I get that it's the Chicago Stadium, the Yankee Stadium of football. I get it. It had to go. It had to go. So the first game in the new stadium was obviously awesome. Some really epic games there. So that's that. And then can't discount the Memorial Cups, because the Pats still are my first love. The semifinal of 2001, us losing in overtime, was the most bitter defeat that I've ever called. And I didn't call the 13th man. One of the questions I get the most is, what was it like calling the 13th man in the 09 Grey Cup? I didn't call it. By some weird regulation of Chorus Radio, I called the first half on national radio, and Rick Moffat, the voice of the Alouettes, called the second half, which included the 13th man. And I'm like, that was at McMahon Stadium in Calgary, as you know. And I'm like, I'm really glad I didn't call that, because I don't know what I would have said.
Well, I want to just come back a little bit to what you were mentioning before, and to put into perspective, you must have a different take when people talk about old stadiums. Oh, it was the greatest. It was the grandest. I've talked to many people that they're like going, no, those places were dumps. They had to go. They were really tough to broadcast out of.
Well, I always knew how iconic Taylor Field was. And the people that are watching this right now remember me saying I called it Canada's football capital. Bob Hughes called it the grand old lady, as you recall, Taylor Field. It was all those things. I remember one day, it was like a Tuesday, and there was, whatever reason I was there, the Riders weren't practicing. There was a padlock on the gate, and this, like a Scooby-Doo van rolled up. And these guys jumped out, and they said, we're driving from Vancouver to Halifax, and we're stopping in iconic sports facilities along the way and Canadian institutions. And here we're at Taylor Field. Would you mind if we went out there on the field? I said, absolutely, go ahead. Found a security guy, opened the lock. They ran in, but they got to the turf and they took their shoes off to run on the turf. And I was like, wow, that's how hallowed these guys feel, who aren't even from Saskatchewan, how they feel about Taylor Field. So the best games were played there. The most games of any CFL stadium, that stadium's hosted more CFL games than any stadium in Canada, Taylor Field. So every game there, trust me, was a unique experience, and we were grateful for it. But it was falling apart. I'm not going to tell you here today what I knew about health code violations and structural violations that were We're just lucky that thing didn't collapse during a game.
Rod, tell me about growing up and listening to CKRM.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to Perry about this because he said, what were your recollections? Perry said, what were your recollections of CKRM? And I said, none of them really had to do with what we've just talked about for the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It was growing up working on the farm. I think a lot of people want, and yourself, you're a farm kid, you will get this. I mean, I had CKRM on all day, every day. And whether it was in the house or the barn or the truck or the tractor, and I didn't have to wear a watch back then. And I think that's where I learned radio, was by listening to it. You know, the weather was at 20 minutes after, the sports was at 20 minutes too. We always knew at the top of the hour it was going to be news. Near, right? It just kept me company, and that's what I remember. You say, what do I remember? The day Gretzky was traded, Dale Corey said it. I was 15 years old helping my mom in the Milestone school. I was carrying textbooks because she was the school administrator. I was helping her set up for the school year. I dropped the textbook. Dale Corey said it on CKRM. Wayne Gretzky's been traded. When they say those where were you moments, that was one. And then somebody asked me the other day, because Dwight Yoakam's coming to Moose Jaw this summer, they said, what was the first Dwight Yoakam song you ever heard? I said, Honky Tonk Man. I heard it on CKRM. Perry Nyes played it. First time I ever heard it. And Fishing in the Dark, same thing. Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, because I was washing a vehicle or mowing the lawn at the farm, or, you know what I mean? Fixing fence, moving cattle, tilling the fields, whatever. It had CKRM was on all day, every day. And it still is for a lot of people. I mean, I just don't live there anymore.
You know, really interesting what you all just said there. That is the experience that a lot of people, how they describe CKRM, that was their experience. It was on all the time. They listened all the time. They knew all the personalities. They knew, like you said, you didn't have to wear a watch. So when you came to CKRM, you really knew that you had arrived.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was that was like walking into...
Very interesting. You mentioned those names. Let's talk about some of those people. Let's talk about Willie Cole. He brought you to the station. And what other things can you tell us your thoughts about Willie?
Yeah, Willie... I mean, I had a dad, but Willie was like my surrogate dad. Willie had a way, I mean, you worked for him, of giving you shit that made you not mad at him, that made you want to do better. Would you agree?
Oh, I would agree.
Maybe you never had those. Maybe you never had those conversations with him, but he would bring me in and play a tape of me talking about Moose Jaw Warriors fans, and he would go, "Rod, we can't have this." And I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean, Willie?" But he understood where my heart was, you know, and he understood what my work ethic was and all the rest. And he was always just guiding me. He never really had to tell me what to do, you know. And I know there was a lot of people there that were upset that I didn't necessarily put in an 8-hour day every day. I'm not a 9-to-5 guy. I'm like, I was in Prince George Saturday night. I'm not going to be sitting here if I don't have to. Willie got that. Willie was always, as long as you're delivering, I don't care when you come and go. And I delivered. So that was kind of our relationship. And I'd like to think that we were very close. I remember one time saying to Willie, when all these country FM stations came in, I said, Willie, we could sit and talk radio, because the man knows radio than anybody else, better than anybody else I've ever known. And I've been coast to coast in both countries. Nobody knows radio better than Willie Cole. And you know that as well as I do, Brad. And I said to him, Willie, we should be playing classic country. I said, we can't compete with these country FM young stations now. They're playing all the new country. I said, the ones in the States, they're really kicking ass. They're playing old time country. And Willie... He shook his finger at me and he goes, when George Strait has a new song, we're going to play it. I'm like, I am not going to argue radio with Willie Cole. Period. And tried a couple times. Didn't win. I get it.
Talk about Fred King.
Well, Fred wasn't there that long with me. I know Perry had a far more time with Fred and deeper talks, but I mean, Fred and I I guess we didn't share an office. Jeff and I shared upstairs office, Courier and I, but Fred would come in usually after his shift and just stand there and lean up against the desk. And the one thing that I always knew about Fred was he was always very interested in what was going on in your life. He, which not a lot of people are like that. You know what I mean? So he wasn't there. Like I say, I want to say a year or two after I started, Fred retired. But what I do remember with him, there was always people around. He did a midday shift. I did a midday, a radio station, at least back in the day. I don't really know what it's like now because I work from home, but it just, there was like a locker room back in the day. Maybe it still is. It was never really just me and Fred. Willie and I had those discussions work-wise, but not me and Fred. Fred was just a nice guy, an icon too. But I mean, he was literally at the end of a long radio career.
You mentioned Perry a few times. Talk about Perry Nias.
Best DJ I've ever heard. Anywhere, period. And he knows that I feel that way because I've told him that many, many times. And I respect the fact that he's had the offers in the big markets. When I say he's the best DJ ever, he is. He could have been in Toronto. He could have been in Vancouver. He could have been in Nashville. But he loves Saskatchewan. He wanted to raise his family in Regina. He still goes to Ceylon regularly to see his family. I mean, that's just Perry, He's seen me at my worst. He's seen me at my best, and we're still best friends. So that's what I would say about Perry.
You've mentioned a few times about how you grew up listening to CKRM. How did your family respond when you got to be on CKRM?
Well, my mom always told me that Dad never missed a game. And that goes back to being on the radio in Weyburn, PA. We had an old John Deere 4320 tractor that had the best antenna you've ever known to man. Better than Elon Musk's Starlink. So Dad would go sit in a tractor to pull in 900 CKBI PA in those games. I think it was a lot happier times for Dad when he could get 980 on anything and 622. So they listened all the time. Never missed a game. Never missed a sportscast. Never missed a SportsCage. So yeah, it was a really big deal for them. But there's one story I'm going to sort of jump this, but I want to tell you a story. I told Perry just about a month ago, and he dropped the phone laughing. Brad, you might too. There's a guy in Rollo by the name of Bill Ollie. He's a very good friend of our family. He raises Clydesdale horses out there and farms. He's just east of Rollo. And he's another guy that has CKRM on all the time in his barn. Keep his horses company. So about 10 years ago, I went out there to interview Bill. His son Keith was a Brandon Wheat King star, NHL star. And for whatever reason, we walked into his barn and he didn't have the radio on. So we were standing in the alley of his barn and I started talking and all the horses turned their heads at me like that because they recognized my voice from being on CKRM so much. So that's part of the rural thing. You asked about my family and I'm sorry to go that way, but I wanted to get that in this interview today, just in terms of what this station means to the people and all that.
And did you carry that with you when you were here? Did you carry that knowledge of what it meant to people? Does that make that bar higher that you elevate your game to?
Nah. I mean, my dad raised me to do my best every day. Didn't matter what you're doing. Whether you're harrowing this field or swathing this field or fixing that fence or writing a column or calling a game or do whatever you do it to 100% of your ability. So that was always me. Yeah, I didn't want to let people down. I knew what it meant to people and I knew what they were listening. Like my dad and I were incredibly close. My dad traveled a lot. I mean, he was a farmer from Milestone, but he was also worked in the National Hockey League for 26 years. So we talked a lot about the listeners. Like Dad used to say to me, he's like, you always say in the Rider games, hello to the ships at sea and the farmers in the fields. The farmers really enjoy that. I'm like, I know that, Dad, because I've been in that tractor. But in 2019, I was at Touchdown Atlantic in Moncton. CFL alumni hired me to come in and work that event, host events and stuff with it. It was Montreal versus Toronto, but there was a lot of Rider fans there. And a sailor, Royal Canadian Navy, came up to me. He knew who I was. He's a Rider fan. I just want to tell you that you used to always say hi to the ships at sea. I was listening. I used to listen. I was on the ship. I really appreciate you saying that. I laughed because the farmers I knew were listening. I didn't actually know the sailors were listening at sea. But that's what I knew. I just knew how it's not just to the people of Saskatchewan. I do a lot of work with the Royal Canadian Armed Forces in mental health, Navy, Air Force, and I'm doing it in the States now. And they sent me, maybe you've seen the photo, I'll dig it out, I can send it to you if you want. Bunch of guys deployed in Afghanistan stood on a tank and held up a Rider flag and sent it to me. I mean, if that doesn't get you, you know. So I knew every single day what that team meant to the people.
And being able to share that with the people. I see in your background there, you got a CFL football. What do you carry with you today? Because obviously you're still broadcasting. You are everywhere. You're involved in sports. What do you carry with you today from your experience here?
A lot of lessons, a lot of memories, a lot of friends. Like, I'd like to say this backdrop is very symbolic of my life now. The CFL sent me that football as part of a basket of goodies. There's a lot more, but I wasn't going to fill the whole thing with it. That mask over my shoulders, my dad's goalie mask that he wore as a goaltender, Milestone Flyers. I remember I wasn't alive when he got it made. He got it made in the 60s. And I was born after that. The Grey Cup came from a fan and a viewer of my TV show. He's in Calgary. And the one thing that I'm actually incredibly proud of is when I left that job with the Roughriders, my phone started ringing from people from all across the CFL, not just fans, but people in the league, coaches, GMs, players. And I realized, I'm like, oh man, you weren't just having an impact with Rider fans, you were having an impact with CFL fans. And that was great. I mean, we were at so many Grey Cups, and I always try to be accessible to the fans, always. Not as much anymore. It's not my job anymore, but it was at the time to be accessible to fans, mostly Rider fans. But I had people at all these Grey Cups that we went to, people would come running up to me and say, oh, Rod, I'm a Ticats fan. Sorry, but you do a great job. And I'm like, hey, I'm just happy you're a fan of somebody. You know, being just thanks for cheering for the CFL. So that's what I take with it, is that it means a lot to all the people of the country. There's millions of CFL fans, and the fact that they would have tuned to us back in the day and had good things to say, or that people from other teams would be, really close friends, have become close friends. I mean, we're bitter rivals. I mean, anybody watching this that really knows me knows I was a very fiery guy. I'm not as much anymore. But I mean, I spent a lot of time in Calgary before I came to Florida, and every single day it came up, that Bo Levi Mitchell shut your mouth call. Every day. And I'm like, well, it's not really what I want to be remembered for, but pretty symbolic of the fire that I carried doing that job.
Yeah, and are you surprised by what people remember from your days on air?
Nothing surprises me, Brad, about anything. So no, I just like hearing people's stories.
And there are a lot of stories, and there is a lot of people that talk about those days, those broadcasts. I, for one, know that there were people that were, fans of other teams that would listen to yourself, to listen to Jeff, to hear the calls by CKRM, because they were different. They were passionate. It was fun to listen to.
Yeah. But I mean, it was never going to make me be non-biased. I wanted the Riders to win, and I wanted the Pats to win. And I guess maybe those people liked that. I don't know. I mean, I listen to the Rider games now. They're really no different than when we were playing. Like the ads are all the same. I remember some jerk writing me one time going, "Oh, you guys sound so hillbilly. All your commercials are for combines." And that's who we are. So if you don't like it, turn it off. What the hell? Yeah. I'm a lot better with dealing with that now than I used to be. Let's put it that way.
If there's one thing you miss about the games, could you tell us what that is?
I don't miss a lot. Like, it was a lot of work. It was work. There was definitely a passion to it, but I don't know. Let's put it this way. When I left, I was ready to go. There's no two ways about that. I mean, I thought that I would miss the players and the coaches, but I still talk with them. So that's not, a thing. It was a part of my life that's over, and I don't dwell on it a whole lot at all. Anybody that knows me, I'm kind of a look forward, not look back guy. I mean, it's fun doing this interview here right now, but it's things that I haven't really thought about a lot in a long time.
Let's talk about now. Let's talk about the things that matter to you now. What is hockey still the number one sport in your mind?
Yeah. Of course, number one, absolutely. That was what's been nice about coming to Florida and having a fresh start and just starting with a fresh canvas with a whole lot of experience learned in Canada. The Panthers, I kind of get a kick out of this. I knocked on the door of CFSL Weyburn in 1988 and said, "Give me a job." And in 2021, I knocked on the door of the Florida Panthers and said, "I do a show. Can we work together?" And they said, "Come on in." And we've been working together ever since. We're in a lightning thing today just because, but it was the same thing. It was just, it's been a really good association. And I've had opportunities to get into other sports, but I'm like, hockey is where it's at. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And now that I have the opportunity, that's what I'm going to go after.
I raised this question too because you are in Florida now and talking about hockey in Florida. I have a gentleman that I speak to about once a month. One of the companies we deal with, he's in Florida, and his kids are in hockey. How has Florida become the center of the hockey universe? Because it seems everybody is.
A lot of people would dispute this, but I really believe that I'm very fortunate with timing to be in the right place at the right time. And when I came here, the rink was empty. The Panthers literally said, "Nobody wants to interview us, so we'll put people on your show," which they did at that time. Now they're Matthew Tkachuk's on Jimmy Kimmel and Paul Maurice is on Jim Rome. And it's a big deal. So if you ask how it happened, the Stanley Cup final has been played in Florida the last 6 years, the first 3 in Tampa, the last 3 in Sunrise. So winning helps. And I've done a lot of research. Just like I learned the CFL, I learned the history of hockey in Florida. And when the Panthers and Lightning came here in the early 90s, 92 and 93, there were 3,000 kids signed up to play minor hockey. And this year there's 35,000 signed up to play minor hockey. So the teams have gone very deep into developing the grassroots of it. Gary Bettman happens to live here. Gary Bettman lives I'm looking at the wrong camera. Gary Bettman lives... I could probably throw a rock. I might be able to hit his place 4 blocks from me. So Gary wanted to grow the game here because he lives here. I think that's a really big part of it. They brought the All-Star game here and the draft's been here a couple of times. So it's just being, you mentioned, I saw your interview with Jeff about being in the community and stuff. And Jeff was right. I guess when you say, what do I miss? Jeff was so right. You go to all these communities there in Saskatchewan, and they always thank you for coming out to their town. And I always laugh because I'm like, we're the ones that are getting everything out of it. But thanks. So here in Florida, I do the same thing. I'm out all the time. I'm out in the community. I'm going to all the rinks. I talk to people. That's just my way. So I'm kind of carrying the flag of Florida hockey now. It's cool, and it's not as expensive as Canada. For $250, you can buy a package that has head to toe, skates to helmet. And the Panthers will have subsidized that, and the Lightning. So it's a lot cheaper than Canada. To answer your question.
Well, and to that point, the sport has grown there, but you brought that work ethic that you said you grew up with, that you show up and do your best every day, and that's what you're doing there now.
Yeah, they appreciate it. They tell me they like me here, and they're like, "Oh, you do what you say. Oh, you back it up." Is that rare? As it turns out, in Florida, it is. So, yeah, and the other thing, I guess you said I'm in Florida now, but I mean, I do a lot of work in the mental health field, addiction recovery. I'm 11 years sober, and that happened while I was at CKRM. And I would say in a lot of ways, that place had my back, because somebody said to me once, they said, "You are as Saskatchewan as a wheat field, Rod." And I'm like, yeah, I would say that's probably true. And when I quit drinking, I had to stop listening to country music. I actually said it on the radio. I said, I have to stop. And I think somebody called my boss at CKRM and said, "Rod said he's not going to listen to CKRM or country music anymore when he quit drinking." And my boss was like, "Whatever he needs." Because there was nobody that enjoyed Craven more than me. There was nobody. Like, I enjoyed it all. And when it was time to stop, it was time to stop. But anyways, so I'm working. I still deal with a lot of Saskatchewan farmers, producers, in helping them, get their lives straightened around. And then I deal with people here in Florida too, because addiction's everywhere, mental health crisis. That's the thing that I was just in New York 2 weekends ago. I went up to watch the Panthers play, and I had breakfast with a guy totally outside of all of this field. And he goes, "Do you find it difficult helping people in this?" I said, "No, it's the easiest thing I've ever done, because I lived it." So that's the thing that I enjoy the most. I do that too. I don't talk about it a whole lot.
I guess a final thought. What would you like to say to the people of Saskatchewan, to the listeners of CKRM?
I'd like to say thanks, because they kept me in business for a real long time. Just thanks.
Rod, thanks for this.
Thank you, Brad.